who are still here. We now have a policy panel. And then I just want to preview for you, the first panel in the afternoon is going to touch on some of the topics. Well, this policy panel, of course, is going to touch on some of the topics that came up in the industry panel hour. And we'll also have a financial panel right after lunch, and it'll touch on some of the issues that came up, how to stay on budget, how to stay on time with projects. And then finally, at the end of the afternoon, we'll have the workforce panel. So it's fine to bring your questions that transcend the topics to the panels, but I just wanted to preview that for you. And I'm just really pleased to introduce Christine King, who is our moderator for the next panel. Christine is a force. It'll probably become apparent to you very soon. Christine married into the local area. Her husband is from the Pittsburgh area, and she is a director with the Idaho National Labs. We're really grateful that the National Labs were not affected by the shutdown, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So Christine, please take it away.
Thank you. So yes, I married into a Western Pennsylvania family 27 years ago. Got the chance to visit my in-laws in Washington, PA, so I scored a couple brownie points before I came up to Pittsburgh this morning. I've been working with the Allegheny Council and Vera and Patty for about 3 years. This past year, they won a grant through the CLEAP program for technical assistance. And we are, in the next 3 panels, we're going to be showing you some of the results of the work that we did to explore nuclear energy for Southwest PA. You'll see with the siting work that we're going to show you first on this panel that starts with also looking at all of Pennsylvania, but there are some unique opportunities represented for Southwest PA, and that probably will get me more brownie points with the in-laws, which is what I'm always after. So a little bit, so I am the director for the Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear. Home to Idaho National Labs, but we work across all the laboratories to bring the best athlete to folks that are interested in exploring nuclear energy. And we have a vast variety of stakeholders in doing this work. Personally, I'm a chemical engineer from NC State, and I started in this business doing maintenance on nuclear power plants for 10 years, working for and with guys named Tiny that aren't tiny, so who's done that work before, right? So, and that 10 years in the field really has become my platform for work. So with that, we'll do some introductions. I'm not giving you guys 5 minutes, 1 minute, name, rank, and serial number, why you're here, what you're excited about, and then we're gonna get started with Femi.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you, Christine. Thank you all for attending today. I'm State Representative Rob Matzie. I am the Majority Caucus Chairman in the House of Representatives, and my district is in Beaver County, about 16 miles north of the Ohio River, goes directly through the middle of my district, so think of a lot of the old steel towns, et cetera, and that's home for me, and of course in my backyard is Beaver Valley 1 and Beaver Valley 2, Vistra's nuclear facility that we heard about in the first panel, and Shippingport is right there in Beaver County. So as you can imagine, I know Representative Venkat had the question in the last panel about NIMBY. Well, it is in my backyard. So from that perspective, but prior to ascending into leadership this session, I served as the Majority Chairman of the Consumer Protection Technology and Utilities Committee, which oversees a lot of energy development and utility work in Pennsylvania. And in 2017 was a founder and co-chair of the recently relaunched Nuclear Caucus, bipartisan, bicameral, first of its kind in the United States. And the goal at that particular time was to try and craft the legislation from the perspective of the state and public policy to hopefully at that particular time keep 3 Mile Island open. And obviously it eventually did close and we were never able to get any legislation across the board from the perspective of trying to keep that alive. But we all know, and I'm sure the next panelist will happily highlight what's happening there now with 3 Mile Island, because it is reopening, and data centers is a hot topic this morning, and I'm sure that's something that will come up throughout our conversation as well. So I'm just happy to be here, happy to have a conversation and continue the dialogue and increase rooms like this more and more, so folks get interested in and the development of and more generation. We want to continue to pump out generation and all of the above strategy in Pennsylvania, and nuclear is a huge part, as it's our second largest part of our generation portfolio. So thank you.
Thank you for having me today. I'm Rob Bair, president of the Pennsylvania State Building Trades. I started an apprenticeship in the IBW in 1987, so I got about 38 years of actually crawling and refueling nukes, building coal burners, working on scrubbers and precipitators, building natural gas. I've even hauled my gentlemanly sized frame 400 feet up a windmill, believe it or not. And as my esteemed colleague said, I have always advocated for an all-the-above energy policy, but Pennsylvania is in a very unique spot to capitalize on the nuclear revolution. And just starting with the Crane Clean Energy Center and moving forward, Pennsylvania could probably supply at least 80% of what we need to do our nuclear fleet over again. And being a lifelong Pennsylvanian, I like to be at the center of it. Now, it's no secret, I want my guys to build every single thing out there, right? That's what I do. But there's nothing more beneficial for my building trades locals than a revitalization of the nuclear industry. And you heard one of the panelists say we had a little issue at Unit 2, and we did. But Unit 1 was the most efficient reactor for over 18 years. Constellation's getting ready to invest $600 million in Limerick to do the power upgrades because we need the power. So we're at a cusp of an opportunity that we have not seen before, specifically in PA. And I like to tell people, I use a little bit of hillbilly logic. You put the horse before the cart, not the other way around. You're going to hear a lot about NRC, siting, permitting. That all needs to be done, and it needs to be done now. You know, I've been very fortunate in my job to work with many of you sitting in this room. John Wallace are sitting out there, Robert Root from the NRDC. And one of the things that I tell people is, over the last 3 years, we have said labor, the environment, the business community, they don't have to be apart. We all know what the end goal is. We don't always agree on the road and the path to get there, but we know where we need to be. And nuclear is going to be key to decarbonizing the world. Thank you.
Zach?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. My name is Zach Koshgarian. I'm a state policy analyst for the Nuclear Innovation Alliance. For those of you who don't know, the Nuclear Innovation Alliance is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think and do tank based down in Washington, D.C., and our mission is to help create the conditions for success for advanced nuclear energy so that it can be part of an energy security and climate solution. And we kind of tackle it in 3 different ways. We focus on NRC modernization, federal and state policy, and private investment in workforce development. And I think I'll just cap it at that so we can move on.
Well, introduce yourself, and then we'll switch you up here if you want.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Femi Omitaomu. I'm a scientist at Oak Ridge National Lab. I've been at Oak Ridge since 2006. And one of the things that I do there is to develop tools for the Department of Energy for various energy-related questions. And one of those tools is what we call the siting tool, which we call Oral Sage. And recently, we've been partnering with GAIN program to actually use that tool to do some analysis for the state of Pennsylvania. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is actually the result of that siting analysis so that we can begin to understand what are the opportunities that is available in Pennsylvania for advanced reactors. Thank you.
Okay, so Femi, if you want to present from here, I'm with you. I like to stand up. So this technical, not only this panel, but the financial panel that you're going to hear in the workforce panel, what I want everyone to be thinking about and taking notes on and joining us for questions is really about what the next step is. What is the next actionable, doable step that needs to happen. Yes, we all know orders need to happen, but we need a pipeline of workers. We need to know where we want to build and why we want to build there, and we need to start figuring out how you marry federal financial incentives with state financial incentives that are either nuclear specific or technology agnostic. So we are about to put this in second gear, and I'm very, very excited to be able to share on behalf of the Allegheny Council the results of the siting study. When you site a nuclear power plant, this is a multi-year effort with environmental studies involved in it. What we have done here is look at exclusionary and avoidance factors. Exclusionary can't fix. Avoidance costs you time and money. So it gives you confidence in moving forward in the places that you see in green or blue on the slides that you're going to see coming forward. I am going to apologize up front if you're colorblind. If you're colorblind, we'd be happy to walk you through separately the results, but what we have presented here, you do have to be able to see colors.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that, and my secret goal is to actually make Femi the most famous nerd in the National Lab System, so help me out with that.
Thank you, Christine. So good morning again, everyone. As I mentioned, I've been at Oak Ridge National Lab since 2006, and since 2008, one of the things that we've been thinking about, my colleague and I, is actually something that is now like a kitchen table discussion for the energy community. And that was, we did an internal study that says that by 2050, we are going to need about 350 gigawatt of new generation. And the question then becomes, what energy source is going to power that? Then the other question is, okay, if nuclear, because around 2008, we know everything about what's going on in terms of future projections. If nuclear is going to carry the weight, where can we site these many reactors? And that is what we've been doing since 2008. We've partnered with a lot of organizations, including EPRI, and recently with GAIN, as well as Henrik, to actually bring the result to the community. What you are looking on this slide is the detail that goes into that. I'm not going to waste time going into that. I can talk to you during the break, or you can talk to Christine if you need more information. But why do we create this tool? In 2008, there was no tool that can actually be used to ask the question, where can I site nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania? So people do siting, but it is piecemeal kind of siting analysis. So we then know that NRC do a lot of licensing. They do early site permit, so they have regulations. So what we did was to take all these regulations, put them into a computational framework, and then develop a tool that can answer that question. For us to do this, we do the analysis as a 100 meter by 100 meter grid cell. That is about 2.5 acres. So each of the pixels you see on this result is about 2.5 acres size. And that is about 3 times the size of a football field. So you can think of the entire United States being divided into about 3 size of football field. So we have about 700 million of those cells, and then we characterize those cells based on all the regulatory guidance that NRC usually look for. So currently, we have about 70 different data sources that inform where you can site nuclear reactor and where you cannot, and why you cannot site where you cannot. So when we talk about the regulatory nuances, So this table is showing some of the things that NRC will look for. So this is a summary. I mentioned the 60 different data layers. We put those 60 data layers into 10 groups. So those are the 10 groups that you see in the first column in this table. In the middle column, those are the thresholds that inform if you want to cite something like small modular reactor. In this case, we use AP300 as an example. You can factor this for AP1000. You can factor it for NuScale. You can factor it for XC100, depending on the technology. In the morning panel, they talked about 11 different reactor designs. Each of those, according to the vendors, they have different thresholds that inform where those technology can be cited. The last column is something we also started doing last year. That is understanding where you can put data centers. So what we did for the state of Pennsylvania is actually a two-in-one kind of analysis where we look at where you can put the reactors as well as where you can put data centers. And then you begin to see where these two may actually compete for land. So you can talk about co-location of these two various different facilities. So I want to take a quick step. I have 10 minutes to give this. I usually do this in 2 hours, so you have 10 minutes to get this. The whole idea is to give you a summary of what we have done and how this can inform some of the discussions later on. If you need more information, please reach out to us. The first thing is population. So definitely you want to site a reactor very far away from where people live. You don't want it in the middle of the downtown or something like that. There are different technology, depending on technology of interest, that determine where you can put a reactor. So what you are looking at, again, we are looking at AP300. These are the areas you cannot put AP300 in Pennsylvania due to population exclusion. So this one says that you cannot put AP300 where there are 500 people per square mile within 1 mile radius. And those are the areas based on that. This is not. The other thing is ground acceleration. So as far as ground acceleration consideration is concerned, that is not a problem for Pennsylvania. So that is a good thing. The next one is wetland and open water. So you definitely cannot put a reactor in the ocean. Of course, there are technology that is looking at floating reactor. Those are not matured yet. But as for now, you cannot put a reactor in open water or in a river. So those are the areas that are excluded based on that. The next one is protected land. These are federal lands, basically lands that have been designated for other purposes. So definitely you cannot put a reactor there. However, if those lands are being reassigned or being repurposed due to federal regulation, that is a different thing. You can definitely identify this area and then make a decision on what next. Slope. Slope is definitely one of the major issues for Pennsylvania. So depending on the technology, you are trying to avoid areas that are, say, greater than 18% slope. This is an economic decision. So the fact that those areas are greater than 18% does not mean you cannot put a reactor there. You just need to spend additional money to actually make the reactor to fit. Another big one for Pennsylvania is landslide risk. Landslide risk is a major one, but this one actually means that you need to do a due diligence for those areas that may have some high risk for the reactor. 100-year floodplain, this is a data set that is produced by FEMA. Again, you don't have a lot of places in Pennsylvania that have this risk. cooling water, if you are talking about light water reactor, you definitely need a lot of water for cooling. And if you, as part of that, you cannot take everything that is available if you are talking about freshwater cooling. So you can only, according to EPRI, you can only take about 10% of what is available. But as far as that is concerned for state of Pennsylvania, you actually have a lot of place within the state that is within 20 miles of fresh water. So you can see that there is very limited area that is more than 20 miles. Again, this is an economic decision. If you are willing to pipe the water beyond 20 miles, those purple areas can actually turn to clear for the technology of interest. Proximity to hazardous facility is another criteria. So basically this means that it's not that the reactor is going to impact these places, but the operations that goes on at these places may impact the operation of a reactor. One of those is commercial airports, military bases, and so on and so forth, refineries and things like that. So you usually need to have a standoff distance around these facilities. Proximity to fault line, that is another one, but again, you can see it's all clear as far as Pennsylvania is concerned. So when we put all these together, we generate a colorful map like this, so which basically means that the green areas are the areas that have no issues, and those areas are ready to go in terms of selecting site for this particular technology. The areas that are in yellow means that they have one issue, and that one issue can be any of those that we've talked about. So orange area means 2 issues, and blue means 3 or more issues. Basically means that the higher the number or the darker the color, the more amount of money may be required if you want to target those areas. So let's focus on the ones that are easy, which is the green area. So if we extract that, this is what the map looks like for Pennsylvania. As we can see, there are a lot of opportunity in the northeast and the northwest Pennsylvania, even the southeast of Pennsylvania as well. Again, this analysis is at 100 meter by 100 meter cell, which is about 2.5 acres. So we can then put these cells together to get a bigger land area, because for AP300 you need about maybe 40 acre site. So what we are looking here is the result of that. So we also look at proximity of those green areas to existing infrastructure. In this case, transmission line, that is very critical. So if you have an existing infrastructure in place, it actually makes that easier for a plant. So if we look at, we also look at data center. So this is the result for data center to us understand where you can put those. Again, this is what the base map of that look like. This is what the aggregate map for data center look like. And then we can bring those together to begin to understand where land may be competing for facility. So what you are seeing here, you see data center, the dark green area, and you see light green area for AP300. And then you can see what that means. Dark green for data center, both of them can go in areas that are in blue, and then the light green area is where only nuclear power plant can go. Also on this slide, if you can see also fiber network, existing fiber network that gives you proximity of those fiber line to those land area. So again, sorry, this is a quick snapshot, but I will be glad to answer any question as we go through the panel. Thank you.
No, no lunch yet, so sorry. Okay, so Rep. Matzie, tell me a little bit about what's been going on in your area and talk a little bit about the regional context. When we were preparing for this panel, seems like your phone's ringing off the hook.
Yeah, a lot of folks are looking at southwestern Pennsylvania. A lot of folks are looking at Beaver County. where I represent. I mentioned it in my introduction, representing a lot of industrial sites in close proximity to transmission and generation, and all of a sudden sites that, you know, we've marketed for quite some time are finally ready to go, and it's like, are they all going to hit at one time? You know, it's a challenge potentially. It's not insurmountable, but I think it's really one of the things we've had conversations about, obviously, is access to generation, access to water. You know, the Ohio River is a deep river, as we all know, and so the Ohio River in close proximity to that has been very attractive to a lot of folks. We did a data center tax credit a few years ago, so as the data centers are coming in, you know, they're not necessarily asking for money, but the key word that comes up every time we have a conversation, and I think that's the key word you're going to hear when you talk to a policymaker about any of this, is predictability. And the predictability of the site itself, the predictability of permitting, and that site selection. So those are the challenges, I think, as policymakers that we will be faced with in tying the two together between nuclear energy and generation, and increasing, as well as siting these data centers that are looking at making southwestern Pennsylvania and all of Pennsylvania potential landing spots. So those are the key issues, I think, for us as policymakers that we really have to get our hands around.
Okay, so Rob, we're all excited about the opportunities that are out there. There's a lot of green in Pennsylvania. I think sometimes we miss on what it takes to actually get the workforce ready for those jobs. We get excited about the building part of it and the getting the order and all of that, but what does it take to get somebody ready to do these jobs?
Well, first off, I want to say, every time I'm with the representative in Harrisburg, he always says it's sunny and 70 in Beaver County. And he's always smiling. Well, after looking at that map, I don't think we're going to get the smile off his face with 60 grit sandpaper after looking at Western PA. So the challenges for getting the workforce ready is much like your supply chain challenges. I can ramp up my training centers tomorrow, but I have to be able to employ those apprentices tomorrow. I can't put a 5-year cohort in while I'm waiting on a job. That's one of the biggest challenges. And two, for us, working with people like Representative Matzie and the policy and getting the training ramped up, is also working with our industry partners, and they're coming to the table ahead of time talking to us, okay? And a lot of times that gets missed. I'm not an easy guy to get along with by any means, but one of the CEOs that has done a fabulous job getting prepared was Joe Dominguez, the CEO of Constellation. Right after him and Governor Shapiro had the meeting, they called me and said, we want to talk about what it's going to take to restart Crane, what it's going to look like for manpower, how we're going to get people, and they sat down and gave us a legitimate timeline, which then allows me as a labor guy to reach out to all my affiliates, to get the plan in place, to get a hiring plan in place, to be able to reach out across, even out of the Commonwealth, to bring enough workforce in, working with my building trades councils in other states saying, what's your apprenticeship programs look like? You know, we're going to have work, this is when we're going to need them. And that's key, because when you hear people talk about these new clean energy jobs, there is no such thing as a new clean energy job. An electrician is an electrician, a steam fitter is a steam fitter, and it takes 5 years to train one. You're not going to do it any quicker than that. You know, I had this discussion with Mike Rowe right across town at Carnegie Mellon. He was right. AI is not coming for the electricians and the plumbers. We need them. But it takes time to train them. Yeah. And there's no way to speed that up. Conduit and wire is conduit and wire. Welding pipe is welding pipe. Representative Matzie and I have talked about this all the time. It's getting enough people in the pipeline and being able to employ them while we're building out this next generation of workers. And that's going to be the biggest hurdle we see.
Okay, so before we go to Zach, let's talk a little bit about where you already have opportunities to put people into the nuclear pipeline. Pennsylvania has a deep nuclear heritage. We've already heard a little bit about that this morning, but what do you do to support today the existing fleet?
So one of the things that will really help spur the next couple years, you heard Representative Matzie talk about the data center development. Now, data centers can be deployed rapidly. They're a big job, they're a lot of money, but at the end of the day, they're a very large commercial job for us. We're building a giant warehouse and filling it full of computers. We're putting a ton of cable tray in and pulling a ton of fiber optic cables. And we got 20,000 amp service, right? We know that right now in Pennsylvania, we still are lucky enough to have the power to support data center build out as we increase generation. You get to 28, 29, it really becomes a big issue. But right now, as we're building those data centers, it gives me an opportunity to ramp my workforce up and get those young men and women into that pipeline over the next 3 to 4 years. And by the time we start deploying SMRs or as Westinghouse new AP1000s, now I have my next generation cohort of journeymen ready to go. So that has been a big part of the discussion that I've been having with Governor Shapiro, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, all of them saying, look, we have the power now that we can still support it. Pennsylvania exports 45% of its power to the PJM. So we're not in a crisis today. We will be in a crisis in 3 years if we don't start building out generation. And that's one of the things that Representative Matzie is a policymaker, and I'm fortunate to have him in Harrisburg because he gets it, you know? And I see Representative Venkat sitting back there, you know, he gets it. We need to have the proper policies. We need to incentivize bringing those businesses in, getting this pipeline trained, because once the data center build out is complete, and it's legitimately 10, 12 years, the nuclear industry is going to be for the next 25 to 30. That's it in a nutshell.
Representative Matzie, you want to add on to that, or?
Well, I think one of the things we've tried to do from a policy perspective, and the governor, the Shapiro administration, in the last couple of budgets, we've really increased funding for workforce development. We've had major investments in economic development, more so than we've had since the Rendell administration. So an emphasis on both because they both go hand in hand with each other. And we're just so fortunate. We talk about the resurgence of the city of Pittsburgh after the demise of the steel industry, and eds and meds comes up all the time. But our education system in southwestern Pennsylvania for the engineers, et cetera, so on and so forth, is just through the roof. Our community colleges, I know both Allegheny and Beaver County are here this morning represented, and when you talk to those folks and then you tie in the relationship they have with the trades to ensure that we have that skilled workforce in place to do the actual construction. We did it with a cracker plant. There were almost 8,000 trades on that site at their peak. So we know how to do it logistically. We can get folks in and out of a site to do that construction. And I think that in and of itself has been a huge selling point to these companies. And we've actually had them have conversations and communications with Shell about how they went about doing things, because at peak times of construction of some of these larger, like Homer City, what they're planning on doing with the gas conversion and the large scale data centers that they're planning on, they need to have those conversations. Bruce Mansfield's a coal-fired plant in Beaver County that shut down early before their license expired. They've begun the process of converting to gas. And they don't have a tenant yet. So they know that the opportunities that are there from the perspective of generation, but the skilled workforce, having those folks in place is really at top of mind as we're making these decisions.
Okay, Zach, so nationally, there's a lot of FOMO going on out there about nuclear. Okay, I'm assuming everybody knows what FOMO is. If not, it's fear of missing out. There we go. But talk to me a little bit about kind of the policy work that you do at NIA, what you see federal policy leaning into, and different things that you've seen at a state level that are rising to match that incentive.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the work that we do at NIA on the state level is focused on stakeholder engagement and then helping answer some people on the state level, answer some of the more difficult technical questions to answer and that they might not have the answer to, like what's the waste going to look like, or what are the economics of some of these plants going to look like? So we kind of pride ourselves at NIA for being geeky advocates, and it seemed to work well so far. And I think just people a lot of times just don't have access to those. So I think we really pride ourselves at NIA for being that independent technical voice to help answer some of those more difficult questions. But I think just getting back to the question, in looking at Pennsylvania, I think Pennsylvania has a lot of key pieces of the puzzle already in place, like the Lightning Plan, for example, to fast-track permitting and accelerate permitting, and then providing tax incentives for large projects is a really important piece of that. Recent legislative efforts to modernize energy standards by including advanced nuclear energy is another important component of it. I think just kind of as an ecosystem, Pennsylvania has a growth-oriented economic development strategy and a lot of different job incentives. Not to mention the manufacturing and the economic development tools that already exist for some of these large projects. Again, like some of the tax credits and then the tax incentives that we've seen. I also think, just to kind of shout out GAIN and the Allegheny Conference, you have a lot of different groups in the state doing a ton of great work. GAIN, Allegheny Conference, I've done some really important work and interesting work with Team PA, looking at what it's going to look like to site data centers. So I think kind of all those elements and components combined are really going to set Pennsylvania forward and help Pennsylvania meet the moment.
All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. So in my research that I've done with Idaho National Lab, I've spent time thinking about where we are in energy generation today. We are operating plants that were built by the generation before us. And we have an opportunity to build the next set of plants for the generation that comes behind us. These are multi-decade assets that we're trying to put the capital investments into. Well, one of the things that's happening is we are displacing coal workers, coal miners, and coal workers. And so Femi and I have spent some time looking at the advantages of brownfield sites. And so there are some things that do bring an advantage of thinking about whether it's a retired site or an operating site. And Femi, if you want to kind of start on the siting pieces and some of the studies that you've done. You've also done some studies looking at existing nuclear power sites. So what does that look like?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. When we talked about the siting, we talked about brownfield. That is, how do we repurpose some of the existing sites? And repurposing the existing site actually has a lot of advantages. We highlight a couple of those. The first one is what I call the economic continuity for the local community. So you have skilled workers that are in the area with very knowledgeable about the operation of the existing plant and things like that. Those set of workers can be retrained and adapted for whatever, either for nuclear power plant or even data center. That also factor into the local revenue, local economic, because those people will stay in the area and they pay taxes, they contribute to the economy of the host community and things like that. So that is one. Even things that we don't normally think of, such as daycare centers. When people go to work, they take their kids to daycare centers. So when they retain the job, the daycare center actually stay in business. That helps the local economy. On the technology side, existing sites also have a lot of infrastructure in place. Things like transmission line, distribution line, they already have roads in place. They already probably have rail lines in place. They have substation in place. They have all kinds of things. Buildings are in place for administrative purposes. So all these things can be repurposed easily, and that brings down the overall cost of the new plant. It also helps with time efficiency, because instead of thinking of a green field, which is basically a land that you have to build everything from scratch, so using an existing site actually helps reduce the time you get the reactor in place or the data center in place, and when you actually start operating on those facilities.
So the so building on those comments on the brownfield site, I mean, we talk about, I think about the energy community that surrounds these plants and the pride that not only the workers of that station, but also the town. They're proud of what we do. Not everybody has affordable power in the world. And, generally, those of us that work in the power industry to make sure that everybody can charge your phone and do funny things on AI now, which seems to be, I guess, I don't know if you've been made into a claymation model lately, but, there's fun things you can do with AI, but it does require energy. We're proud of that work that we've done, but we've never really made a whole bunch of fuss about it, right? One part of the study that we did was to specifically look at the job codes associated with those that work in coal stations and coal mines and the skills and the job codes that we have in nuclear power plants. There is a 60 to 70% overlap between who runs a coal station and who runs a nuclear station. And we tend to think that if you're running a coal station, that you can't possibly work in a nuclear power plant. And if you take anything away from today, please take away that that's not true. You boil the water a little bit differently. Secondary side of the system is the same, right?
So an electrician at a coal-fired powerhouse can absolutely be an on-site electrician in a nuclear powerhouse, a steam fitter, the maintenance department, an I&C tech. All those jobs overlap. And it's about keeping the soul of the community going while you're repurposing those brownfield sites. And you heard Femi say, you have your transmission lines, you have your water. Most of these coal sites are much larger sites than our existing nuclear sites. Representative Matzie, what's Homer City, like 6,000 acres or something? It's a massive site. So looking at repurposing those sites, bringing those energy jobs back, and then repurposing our workers and upscaling. Because there again, in the nuclear industry, and I've worked there, don't need to retrain the plant electrician. I need to retrain him to work in the nuclear industry in a zero mistake environment. But it's a complete job set of skills that transfers over. And you're right, Christine, this has been missed in what we call the just transition. And I'm so thankful that it's now being brought to the front, because those are good paying, family sustaining jobs. They're jobs with health care, they're jobs with pensions. They allow people to retire with dignity. They can spend a career there. They spend their money in their communities. They're not drawing unemployment. They're not drawing social services. They're paying their taxes, they're buying homes, and they're feeding the local economy. And that's really what the hell this whole thing is about. I'm sorry, but that's it in a nutshell. These communities are based off of energy. And to keep the soul of your community, I saw what happened when TMI closed. I saw a school district that almost went bankrupt. I watched 700 people lose their jobs. I watched the town of Middletown turn into a ghost town. Now it's being revitalized because they're bringing that plant back. And I know Alex is sitting back there from Constellation, but I think they're up to 500 permanent hires, not including any of my people. 500 already on site, paying taxes, spending money in the community, paying back into that school district. We have to look at repurposing these. We have to.
So, Rep. Matzie, let's talk about the legacy of energy and manufacturing in this state and how you started with all the different conversations that you've had, but I think you guys have the elements to really market yourselves as the place to, kind of hurry up and get this done.
We had a rally in Beaver County on the steps of the courthouse the day 3 Mile Island closed. And it was about saving nuclear energy in Pennsylvania because Beaver Valley 1 and 2 were right down the road. And I could remember basically opening my remarks with, let's think about all of those families whose lives changed today. Because as policymakers, we can talk about energy policy, but we also have to take into account the capital of human capital, you know, and what that truly means. The baseball coach, you know, the person you worship with, the person you see at the supermarket, now all of a sudden has lost their job and maybe have to move. I told the story on the stump when I ran for office the first time, growing up in the 70s and the early 80s when the steel mills were closing. And you'd leave school end of May, beginning of June, and you'd come back in September and there'd be 10, 15 less kids in class because their dad lost his job at the mill and he moved to Raleigh, North Carolina or Texas or wherever there was a job to go to. We didn't have cell phones in those days, so you saw them in school, and then, you know, and I lived in a pretty large district at that particular time, so you didn't see them again until September unless you played baseball in the summertime, and then all of a sudden those kids were gone and you lost complete contact with them. So what that truly means to a community and the fabric of the community. So those are things we have to take into account, but it goes back to how the community truly rallied to say, hey, Beaver Valley 1 and 2 is so important. You know, when they shut down, guess what? All the laborers come in, and the electricians come in, and the plumbers come. Those guys come in. We have people in my district that are specialists in when a shutdown occurs at an energy plant. I got a buddy of mine I went to school with, because at tax time he comes in all the time with his 11 or 12 W-2s from all over the country or wherever the heck he's working, and how he had a problem with unemployment in this state or that state once everything shut down. But he's been doing it for, you know, I'm out of high school 40 years. He's been doing it for 40 years basically, because he went right into the trades right out of high school. So the people in our region recognize that. They know that. They're used to having those folks live in their neighborhood who've worked in the plant and what that truly means. I am so excited about seeing how many people are here today, because it's like if we'd have had this meeting 6 or 7 years ago, we might have had 3 tables, 4 tables, and that would have been about it. So, you know, the mood, the opinion, everything, and I know in the last panel, the panelists talked about some studies and surveys. I've seen those studies and surveys. The opinion about what nuclear energy means and how that's accepted in a community has completely changed. It has drastically changed. And a lot of it goes back to what you said. The demand is there, and it's seen as clean, it's carbon-free, and the best line I'll give you today outside of the predictability line is it's base load generation. You need base load generation to do manufacturing, period, plain and simple, full stop.
I apologize. That was my glucose alarm going off. So, John, if you see me start to flop, bring me a donut quick, please.
Do we have any juice in the house ready? Okay, all right. Zach, so as you look at what's going on in other states that have been successful, you know, maybe share a little bit about some of the different approaches that you've seen, and maybe those things might trigger some ideas for leadership here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no, it's a very important question. So, you know, Christine and I were just up in Syracuse a couple days ago, or I guess it feels like a lot longer than that, kind of looking at what New York State is doing for advanced nuclear energy development. And, you know, one thing that kind of kept coming up was the idea of public-private partnerships. And I think public-private partnerships are going to be really crucial to kind of getting the ball rolling and kickstart some of the projects and processes. You know, NYSERDA and the New York State Energy Research Development Authority is partnering with Constellation, the utility, to apply for a DOE grant that would support an early site permit up at their 9 Mile point, with, I guess, the end goal is siting a small modular reactor up there. And I think...
Okay, Zach, pause. What's an early site permit?
Early site permit is what you need to site a nuclear reactor. And it's an important step in kind of developing the nuclear energy project. And it is oftentimes a very expensive process for utilities. So I think having that partnership is really important with NYSERDA, and I think it does a couple things. One, again, it just helps private developers and utilities and the industry. And the second is, I think it sends a signal to, I guess, supply chain developers and private industry that they have a competent state partner who's willing to work with them and really develop their either technology or their supply chain. You know, something else I'm really considering is just the idea of innovation hubs, and I think the conversation around data centers is something that we think we need to have. And Virginia is really going deep on the data centers with the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium, and then the Virginia Nuclear Innovation Hub. And I think just the idea is to have conversations and understand the demands and the needs of industry and the communities in which these projects are going to happen, because data centers and conversations are never easy, especially with these kind of larger, more complex projects. And I think just the last thing I'm kind of seeing and notice out of successful states that are really moving the ball forward with nuclear energy is just having an alignment of outcomes. And I think aligning outcomes on a local, state, and industry level makes developing some of these more complicated, complex, large infrastructure projects just a little easier if everyone's kind of swimming in the same direction. And it just kind of gets to this idea of planning slow and building fast. And I think it is an approach worth considering as Pennsylvania really moves towards developing its energy plans.
Okay, so I'm going to apologize up front to my Westinghouse colleagues. I am not here to offend, but you're not the only company that's developing advanced energy technology. Femi, do you want to talk a little bit about, as we look at different technologies and how they deploy into markets differently and they support different use cases?
Yeah, so we definitely, as of today, I think we have 11 different reactor technology out there. So a lot of those are still around the light water reactor technology kind of technology. But there are also other technology that we call them air cool or dry cool kind of technology. So that means they don't use a lot of water, but you still need some amount of water to do basic operations. But for those ones, you can actually get the water from like a regular water supply that we all get in our various homes. So they don't need to be closer to freshwater site for cooling and things like that. In terms of large reactors, AP1000 seems to be in field by itself. But in area of small modular reactor, there are a lot of technology in that space, and they are about the same in terms of generation output. In terms of the siting parameter as well, they are very close. NuScale is one of those, and the result I show actually mimic kind of very similar to AP300. And NRC recently approved NuScale technology, and they are asking, for example, population is the major thing. They are looking at 500 people per square mile within 1 mile, and that kind of encourage other new technology as well, because some of them have been thinking in terms of maybe 5-mile radius, 4-mile radius kind of thing, but the approval of NuScale actually by NRC actually encouraged them. We also have new ones that are what I call the micro reactors. Those are very small generating plant. For those ones, they actually are they don't have a lot of constraints compared to the big ones, and you may see those ones actually moving closer to population centers. But the full information about the type of constraints that need to be put in place with respect to safety and security is not finalized yet. But overall, most of these technology, they don't vary much. I can say that in terms of differences, there are about 3 areas. Population exclusion zone is one of them. Ground acceleration is another one. And then slope is another thing that differentiates them. Then if they use water, the amount of water that they will require for cooling is another one. Maybe also whether you are talking about a park, some of them are kind of a park which contain multiple units as a single park, or you are talking about a single unit as a park. So those are some of the differences that differentiates these various technology. I'm an employee of a national lab and a DOE contractor, so I cannot be very objective about any technology, so I have to be specific about that. I'm just giving differences in terms of what is available publicly.
There's a lot to choose from, and there's a lot of good questions to ask also if you have the opportunity to sit with a developer. So we've heard in this panel that there is a lot that Pennsylvania has to offer. You have not only the workforce, you have brownfields, you have transmission connections and energy communities, and all of these things wrap into being able, I think, Rep. Matzie, for you guys to put yourself in, forward-leaning into the marketing even before you choose a technology. But PJM's been in the news recently, not necessarily in a good way, but talk. You've been working with PJM in your career. Give us maybe a little spice to go to dinner, go into lunch with here about the challenges of PJM and maybe where that's headed.
Before I got into government, I was a journalist, so I'll give you a tease. Actually working on a bill. We're working on a study bill, and I know no one wants to see another study, but it'll be a time-constrained study bill about PJM and what it really means to Pennsylvania. I've never been one to say we should leave PJM, but we've got so many projects of all generation types, not just alternative energy, that are just sitting in queue. And we are exporting 31% of all the energy we generate. We want to remain an exporter, but when other states are seeing benefits to air quality and seeing benefits to cheaper generation, and we're supplying it while they don't have those same issues, it's a problem. I know the administration, Governor Shapiro has talked about his challenges. He took them to court, and and they had a conversation, and they were able to come up with somewhat of a solution. But when you look at the auction and you look at how it works in purchasing generation, it's a real monkey wrench. And I think we really need, as policymakers, need to have the data and look at it and see, does it make sense for us to do our own thing? Does it make sense for us to stay in? Does it make sense for us and consumers for it to be different so that we can bring costs down? Because the last thing we want in Pennsylvania, with all this talk about data center development, is we don't want brownouts, we don't want blackouts, we don't want higher costs than necessary. So we need to really get our hands around it from a policy perspective, from an environmental perspective, from a manufacturing perspective, and I think those are the challenges and some of the challenges that we face, and hopefully if we can get some support and get something done across the finish line with getting this study, that we can have that data, we could look at it, we could work with folks like the Allegheny Conference and the Pennsylvania Environmental Council and the NRDC and others to have those conversations to see what makes sense. Because if you don't have all the stakeholders at the table, I've made my bones in the legislature being a bridge builder. Ambridge is my hometown where we make bridges. But go across the line, bring everybody to the table, both parties, business, labor, everybody. Let's figure this out. And that's the goal.
So I'm going to leave you guys with an analogy. If you're working on energy of any part of this ecosystem, whether it's front end of the supply chain and fuel and manufacturing these components that go in, developing the workforce, constructing a reactor, operating a reactor, and managing the waste on the back end. Working these projects is like solving a Rubik's Cube. You cannot solve just one side of it without screwing up the rest of the puzzle. You have to be working together along the whole timeline of the project. And what I'm hoping today is, as we close this panel out and you go to lunch, please don't sit with the folks you already know. Please meet new people such that we can start to build the consortiums across Southwest Pennsylvania that are needed to bring these projects to fruition and bring new economic development to this community. And maybe one day my in-laws will actually understand what I do for a living. So anyway, thank you to the panel as well.
Thank you.